All right. Hello, everyone. This is Ryan Watts from Ryan Watts Life Coaching. I'm here with Steve Lang. Steve is a life coach, yoga instructor, and author of the Being by Design coaching package, coaching curriculum, if you will. How you doing, Steve?
Yeah, very well, man. Really excited to be here. This is an exciting opportunity for me to share with you my passion and my hope for an enlightened humanity. So thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's great to connect with you. I guess the topic we're kind of throwing on the table today is, to me, it seems like in all my coaching conversations, it really comes down to nervous system regulation, right? It seems like a big term, right? But I mean, we're talking about going from like being stressed out to being kind of calm, right? Um, so tell me your thoughts on this. Why is this such an important thing? And do you have a similar experience with this type of nervous system regulation idea?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's really the unregulated nervous system. While it sounds really scientific, it's just an epidemic right now in our society. If you look at it just from a very practical standpoint, people in general are engaged and connected 24/7, 365. And that engagement through all of their senses just becomes so overwhelming that many people don't even understand that they're overwhelmed or burnt out or stressed or anxious because it's just become a natural way of being. So when you start playing with some of the techniques that start to soothe the nervous system, it's only then you can really appreciate its value.
Yeah. So what do you say to the person? Because I will tell people that, I basically have my phone on do not disturb all the time,
Yeah.
and I also interact a lot on social media and things like that, but I manage it. So what do you say to the person that's like, I can't turn off my phone? What if I have to return an email to the boss? Or, what do you say to that person that has the rebuttal with that?
My response is that it's natural. It's part of the human condition. And until we understand why we're behaving that way, it's difficult to make any type of change. And the reason we're behaving that way is because we have senses, 5 senses. Some people say 6, some people say 7, but those senses are just busy gathering data. And those senses are designed in a way that they're supposed to be receptive. And what I mean by that is you're almost like a very natural position as a human being would be almost to settle in and sit back and allow life to come into them through the reception of the senses and then engage with that. But what's happened is our senses have become so stimulated, they've actually become greedy. Like the yogis would say, the senses have become greedy, and now they've gone from organs of reception to organs of acquisition, and we're going out to get things. So until we realize kind of our nature, if you will, this idea that we're meant to receive rather than acquire, it's difficult to make any change. So I would tell somebody that what they're experiencing is natural. It's just an exaggerated state of being.
Yeah. Oh, that's I haven't heard it quite put like that. I really, really like that. And so if you had somebody this far, somebody comes to you and says, how am I supposed to turn off my cell phone? My boss might call, or my kid might call, or how am I supposed to be disconnected, or, even create a half hour of disconnection? And you give that response and you say, you're experiencing this exaggerated sense of being. And they're like, okay, I'm following you there. What is the next step? What can you tell them to do to kind of, because they might have this half hour where they're just sitting there thinking about, oh my gosh, they're probably calling or something like that. Like what guidance can you give somebody who's in that experience?
Yeah, so there's two things that come up immediately for me. And the first thing is it's really difficult to execute change when we're in the middle of a stressful situation.
Mhm.
So if I want to create some space between me and my phone, or I want to create some space between me and anything that is demanding my attention, I need to do that in a practice environment. So the first thing I would recommend to somebody is they start to consider seated meditation.
Yeah.
Now, seated meditation in and of itself suggests this really kind of deep contemplative experience, and it can evolve into that. However, if you're willing to wake up just 15 minutes earlier than usual and literally set a timer for just 10 minutes and sit in your most comfortable chair and literally do nothing, that then illustrates to you the ability to create space. So what I've done now is I've created space between my alarm wakes me up. I'm now sitting in a chair for 10 minutes and I've created space.
Mhm.
So that's a real kind of exaggerated example. However, if I do that routinely enough, the next time I get a text, I can then create maybe 10 minutes of space between the time the text arrives and the time I answer. So it's all a matter of creating space between me and the environment.
Your program, right, which is called Being by Design, I guess I would ask you to speak to that title before we got into my question there.
Sure. So I think that the cool thing about Being by Design is it's based on the premise that as human beings, we reside at the top of the evolutionary ladder. And by that, I mean that our intellect and our consciousness is greater than any being on the planet.
Mhm.
But what happens is we've kind of forgotten who we are. We have forgotten that that capacity resides within us. And so back to your question earlier, the fact that I'm constantly overwhelmed with incoming data, which distracts me from creating my own reality, I'm now living someone else's reality. So Being by Design suggests that through techniques and method and process and this curriculum I've created, that you can in fact create your own reality. And to the degree that you can reprogram your beliefs and your thinking and your mindset and manage your relationship with your emotions, you can change your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems so simple when you say that, right? And I'm listening to what you're saying here, and you just like, wow, it's about, creating this space here and, making sure that, I've got the nicest car, what about all those things that really, that's what I'm kind of told that I'm supposed to be focused on, where all those things fall in.
That fulfillment is an inside job.
Mm.
So 100%, I would encourage everyone to go out into the world and conquer whatever it is you're interested in, career, relationship, whatever that looks like. And then you'll need to decide whether or not those acquisitions fill you. And by fill you, I mean satisfy you on a deep and intimate level. And my sense is that people will find out that that in fact is not fulfilling. So all I'm suggesting is work from the inside out. So if in fact, I'm making this up, let's pretend that I want a beautiful, soul-connected, purpose-driven partner. Well, in order for me to experience that relationship, I would need to create that within me so that when I met that person, it was an aligned connection.
Yeah.
It's just a different way of going about it.
Mm-hmm. I don't know where I heard it once, but somebody once told me, I was talking about how somebody was really bothering me. That person bothers me because of this. And they're like, well, that really means that they're reflecting something to you that you see inside yourself and you're not okay with. And if I think hard enough about that, it's true. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's funny, people will say that life is an echo or life is a mirror. And in Alcoholics Anonymous, they'll use this cliche, if you spot it, you got it. However, that's a great thing.
Yeah.
That's a great thing. In other words, everything that shows up in our life shows up in the right place at the right time, at the right volume to give us an opportunity to overcome that. So let's say, for instance, I have an interaction with someone like you mentioned, and I'm like, oh, that person is so extraordinarily judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
And I go on this rant about how that person is judgmental. And then in a moment of space, I realize, gee whiz, I behave the same way.
Yeah.
How can I change that? How can I change that behavior in me?
Mm-hmm.
And as that behavior in me changes, then I start seeing less judgmental people because that connection's no longer there. It's always inside. Nothing happens outside. Like, what I mean by that is events happen outside, but experiences happen inside.
Yeah.
So it's always inside.
So specifically with your program being by design, how does it help address this issue of nervous system regulation, right? Our kind of perception of our senses.
Sure. So there's 10 classes, and each class is topic specific. There's a curriculum. And then after each class, there are actually mindfulness exercises associated with that particular topic. So like, let's say, for instance, one of the first topics might be beliefs. Like, how do we identify those beliefs that pretty much navigate our life? And sometimes many of those beliefs are not actually ours. They're pre-installed beliefs. And those pre-installed beliefs may in fact generate some sense of anxiety or fear. We don't know why we're feeling anxious or fearful. We don't know why our nervous system is on overload. And once we've identified the core of it, beyond sensory reception, we can go to work at uninstalling those programs. And we can reinstall programs that are more aligned with that person that we know ourselves to be. So to answer your question more specifically, there's curriculum as well as mindfulness-based exercises. Those exercises might be meditation, breath awareness, yoga movement, journaling, mind mapping, whatever happens to come up for the client.
For those of us who don't immediately see the connection between like life coaching and yoga, how can you help them build that bridge?
Yeah, it's really so beautiful. It's yoga is the original life coaching system.
Mm-hmm.
No doubt about it. And you don't have to be a philosopher or a deep student to see that. But what yoga has done is it's created 8 steps. And these 8 steps are really about self-discovery. And during the 8 steps of this yogic self-discovery, you start to kind of strip away layers of yourself that no longer serve yourself and really just expose the true nature of who you are in this kind of high intellect, high consciousness being. So yoga is the original life coaching curriculum.
Yeah. Yeah. And I pointed that out because to me, it's funny because the things, both of them entered my life at a similar point, and it just makes sense to me. And I think there's something that perhaps I'll be able to word this correctly. There is something about me being kind of a uncoordinated, out of touch with my body, white male, right? That when I found that getting in touch with myself, right? It's like this is where I have difficulty explaining. I'm not my arm, right? But me being aware of the movements of my arm helps me connect with myself at a deeper level, right? And I think people call that embodiment, right? It's like it is the experience of being, aware that, your body is part of the self. Right. And so it just makes perfect sense to me, because I would not be able to access my kind of authentic self without having that embodiment feeling. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, 100%. I think you said it beautifully. This idea of how do we embody ourselves? How do we occupy ourselves? How do we remain centered in ourselves? Because generally speaking, we're disconnected from our body. Human beings are disconnected from our body. We're drawn outside of ourselves.
Yeah.
And the wisdom and the knowledge and the intellect and the consciousness resides inside. So yoga starts with the body. It starts with occupying the body. If we can't occupy the body, we can't access any of the magic that resides there.
Yeah.
And it all happens inside.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's happening outside. I mean, even if we were to deploy artificial intelligence, it's still our interaction with it, or our prompting, or our navigating of it, that makes it then applicable. So you're absolutely right. It starts with the body.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was just such an interesting thing to me, to be able to do, in some of my first yoga classes, of being like aware of, like, when you're in kind of these strange contortions, sometimes it takes a new, like, neural pathway, if you will, to figure out how to straighten your arm up, you know what I mean? So you're in, your body's more aligned. And that is, there's a sense of growth there, but there's also a sense of discovery too.
Yeah, and you really say it beautifully. Like, when's the last time somebody has asked you to lift the arch of your foot?
Yeah.
Right? How can you lengthen your breastbone?
Mm-hmm.
How can you engage the bottom of your buttocks?
Yeah.
Like, we really then need to pause and activate, to your point, these neural pathways and say, oh, right. Like, in fact, I can activate these parts of my body. I'm directing it. I might not be in control of it, but I'm directing it.
So you're able to identify, how this muscle is stretching or whatever. And then you take that and you move it to another kind of domain, right? You're like, how are, you feeling? And it's like, oh, wow, I'm feeling irritated because my chest is tight, or, and it gives you language to be able to access your experience and explain it and share it.
Yeah, it's really a great point. It really is the beginning of this self-discovery language.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. It starts with the direction of the body. And I love your idea of, how do I explore how I feel?
Yeah.
Right. Because generally speaking, when you ask people, well, how do you feel about that?
Yeah.
I say, well, what do you mean? How do I feel about that? And then, well, no, tell me how you feel about that. And then you'll be like, well, I'm angry. Oh, okay. Well, can you say more about anger? Like, what is it really about anger? Anger tends to be this like really blanket response.
Yeah.
And then maybe if the person is willing and they have created a language, they can dig in, and they're not really angry. They're frightened.
Yeah.
Or they're disappointed, but you have to kind of stick with it. It's definitely, to your point, it's an exploration.
Yeah. Yeah. And the feelings thing is just one thing. I also notice now,